we didn't start with any of them. So I think the thing that's really important for us to be mindful about is that we didn't start life with beliefs. We kind of pick them up as we learn ideas about ourselves, the world around us, and so on. So I always like to take beliefs with a little bit of a pinch of salt. So even if I say I believe, where's this I believe coming from? Is it what I believe? Is it something I picked up? Did I create that belief? Where did that belief come from? I'm fascinated by the belief. But it would seem also that beliefs are a very tight shoe. Whether you believe you can, whether you believe that you can't, you're probably right. So it's kind of this like the visor through which we look at things through. Funny enough, when I'm working with people around beliefs, as I often do, when I'm giving talks, I often prefer the word ideas, especially if somebody's at a point where they're needing to, or it might be valuable for them to shift their beliefs, because an idea, it strikes me, has a little bit of a softer texture to it than the word belief. Consider that for a moment. I invite you to consider that. What a belief feels and how the word idea feels. They have a different quality to them. I think I've had to really look at and try and explore beliefs and who I am and what beliefs mean and where beliefs came from. There are some things that I feel are really important. Being true to yourself, allowing other people to be true to themselves. Because the interesting thing about that thing that you ask about beliefs is that it brings into question the thing that I did explore, which is, what do I know? What do I actually know, and what can I verify? And there isn't that much that I actually can directly verify. If you had asked me that question about 10 years ago, I'd probably give you a whole list of things. I believe this, I believe that, I believe this, I believe that. I don't necessarily believe anything. I could be in a different type of environment where probably beliefs could emerge. I believe that we should be doing this, I believe that we should be doing that, but not when it comes to fundamentally belief. And when we really get to the core of what is it I know, what is it that I believe to be true, what is it that I know to be true. My primary thing when you bring to our attention this word belief, it's a very heavy word. It's a very strong word. It doesn't seem to allow much, by the nature of it, room for anything else. So it's almost as though there's a feeling as well as the actual the definition. What do I believe? I don't really. I'm not really interested in being too tied down to this or to that. What happens if we step back, a little bit like as we're doing now, what happens if I step back from what I think and what I feel and what I know or what I assume that I know? What happens if I step back and look afresh? And I found it quite useful when I realised most of the beliefs, all of the ideas I had, weren't mine. They were all picked up, they were all simulated. For me, that was really liberating. And I'm not really that interested in picking up more beliefs. Yet at the same time, it does seem that there are some themes or some notions that seem to be very dear to us that we live our life by. And what I feel is that if we step back from what we think that we believe or how we currently perceive ourselves in our world, we then suddenly get a different vantage point. We get more vision because we've stepped back. The viewpoint is different. And that just degree, I think that things change it. Because I think there's a real issue about who am I, where am I in the world, what can I do, what can I contribute? And often the beliefs and so on make us feel trapped, or I can't learn this, or I can't do this, I can't do this, or I shouldn't be doing this, I shouldn't be a mum and I'll go out to work, or whatever it might not be. Any of these things. But if I can stop and I can step back and I can find out what feels true to me, what feels to be the things that I'm good at or that seem to resonate with me. Oh, this notion about treating people right, that seems to feel right. Or this thing about doing your best. Because I guess beliefs, the positive thing about beliefs is it's to try and keep us, again, like all of the stuff of the mind, to keep us safe or to feel comfortable or to feel certain or whatever. But maybe sometimes when we explore beliefs and We realise that we can still operate not completely knowing or with some uncertainties. Okay, yeah, it's my belief today, as you say, or it's, do I believe that or it's somebody else's belief? We spend a lot of time fighting for beliefs. Either it might be on globally, wars or whatever, or just between partners or friends. I believe this, I believe that. We become so attached to them, somehow our identity becomes linked to the beliefs. What comes into mind is that probably somewhere softly I probably had a belief that I need to know, or I want to know, or I need to be sure. Probably somewhere there's a belief around that I need to be sure. But now I don't need to know. I don't need to. Beliefs, it's really interesting. Beliefs don't interest me. Having beliefs don't interest me in the way that they did before. I think that I found that allowing them to come in and come out, or look at them as and when, is more useful. Love, compassion, trust, connection. So it just strikes me that our head isn't the complete, and what I think isn't the whole story. Maybe part of that other realm is that bit which is prior to language. It's all that stuff kind of beyond all the stuff that I'm so holding on to. You know, it's almost like there's we spend most of our life going through, I've got to do this, got to do that, got to do that. But then there's this other, softer space that's far more fluid. Just sit with the word compassion for a while. There's something about it that tends to soften the heart, and that just has a quieter feel about it, and I love that. And I don't know quite what that is about, but I feel somehow there's something in that stuff of the heart. And somehow over a period of time, you know, Rene, what's been fascinating to me is that heart work. I started off as a coach talking about this, and then now more and more, almost everything pertains to the heart now. Something's happened, and I don't know what that is, but I'm fascinated. In my work and through my own journey, I've realised that the uncertain, the unspoken, the invisible, the trust, the thing, the unquantifiable, the bit of somebody that just wants to be at peace is more significant ultimately to somebody's sense of happiness and well-being and ability to feel comfortable than lots of the practical, the planned, the structured and so on. So I see it a lot of the time when I'm working with people. We think we want the success, and all the things we want to achieve, there are no guarantees. They may come, they may go. But the thing that we really want is the peace and the fulfillment. And it strikes me that the peace and the fulfillment is far easier to arrive at than the success and the fulfillment, which is far more fleeting, it's far more difficult. And it also strikes me, if that fulfillment and peace is what we really want, why don't we start off there? And I think that more and more I'm wanting to explore that particular space. I found that consciously or unconsciously that I've been exploring that. When I run the workshops that I run, you know how, for example, in music, you know, they have saying, particularly you see it a lot in gospel music and soul music, there's a phrase that sometimes when somebody goes into the spirit, or where they go off, I often say, you know, when they're singing it and then they improvise and they're here and they're there, they're just feeling it, or they're jamming, or we see it in musicians. It's not just actually in gospel music, you'll see it in all types of music, and you can see the person on the bass drum, you see it in classical too. They're playing the thingy, but they're in this other world. There's something extraordinary about that. Well, it's the times in my workshop whereby most of the people in the workshop, because they want practical content, how am I going to build my business? How am I going to grow this? But once we get into the intangible stuff, trust, people are transfixed. They're alive, they're vibrant, they know there's something, everybody. And even the people who that's not been their language or their landscape, they're curious. What's that about? This is a beautiful question. Well, as a leader, you're right, then these things, beliefs, values they're important because people are going to be looking for you to have beliefs, values and so on. So you've got to have them, and it's best that they are deeply set, because people will be able to see through you if they feel as though you're just saying that, which is why we've got a lot of challenge with politicians across the globe. I think a leader has got to, yes, have beliefs, values and so on, but at the same time, they've got to capture the imagination. So you're having to invite people into your world, and you're having to invite people to believe the possibilities of what might happen. I think a leader, a great leader, has got to be able to, fun enough, have got to at the one and the same time have their values or beliefs, and yet at the same time, very often because they're trying to change things, believe that whatever currently is the status quo, they've got to not completely 100% believe in it. Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I want to invite people to look afresh at life. I really want people to look at everything that they believe about life, everything, and about themselves. Because what I suspect that they will find in that first looking is that, first of all, the beliefs that they have about themselves aren't wholly true. That's immediately liberating, because, oh, maybe I thought that I wasn't good at, maybe I was. Suddenly they're going to discover in the little bit of room to maneuver that there's more possibility, there's already more in the tank. I want them to discover their own magic. I want them to look afresh at life. Because when we look afresh at life, we can become free from that which we believe or we're held into that is holding us too tight. It means that we can see, hopefully, the others more compassionately when we look afresh, because we become more empathetically. All of the wise people, so-called wise people, they looked afresh at life, the Mandelas, the Gandhis and so on. They understood the psyche of the other person. Until you understand the psyche of the other person, you can't be at peace. You can't arrive at peace. Peace is codependent. I can't be at peace unless you're at peace. So I've got to step and look afresh. I've got to become empathetic to your world. So I've got to step back. And so really what I hope is that we will all step back, look afresh, and discover our interconnectedness. For me, sometimes, and this is where language becomes really interesting, because if I use the word God, spirituality, humanist thingy, I might perhaps be speaking about exactly the same thing. Probably am. I go as far as to say I probably am. It's how it's interpreted. Apparently, that we're all descended from pretty much the same geographical place on the planet Earth in Africa. So if that's the case, well, what we find, we are literally we're interconnected, interrelated, we're one. So I think the thing that I'm really excited about is that we look at that interconnectedness. I describe it in one of the talks, it's like all the branches of the tree and all the leaves, they flutter differently. They think they're so different because they look different and they move differently. But if they could look back at the root, they'd realise they're one. And that's what strikes me to accord to me to be truth, that we're of one. And only if I can see that, then suddenly, I'm not saying that everything's resolved or solved, but I think that we become far more empathetic. There comes a point that it can't just be about me, that there is this us, but how big that us, I don't know. And I don't know about that. You bring into play the universal. That's fascinating, because again, what it brings home to me very near and dear in terms of my own life. Space and science, when as a kid, fascinated me, but I don't know anything about it. I don't personally know how far we've travelled into space. I don't understand how that works. I don't understand the ideas and concepts about it. I can't verify it. I'm not been beyond the world's atmosphere. I don't know what. I can see things that apparently people up in the sky, and people say that star's got, they tell me we're of stardust, but I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I don't know. But what I will say about that I don't know, I personally found that I don't know was probably the most useful thing that has ever happened to me in my life. Yeah, there is definitely a sense of awe. I think it's extraordinary, because I think whether it is that one looks within the body or out into the world, I again equally, I'm in awe of how on earth this mind body, how this operates, how the blood pumps through the body. And I think one of the things that's interesting, going back to the central point here about belief, when we usually day to day or in politics or in business or in relationships or in arguments or community, whatever it is, are talking about beliefs and arguing about ideas or trying to make things happen, we tend to focus on a handful of things that we can kind of argue all day about. We tend to avoid things like, how does this mind-body thingy operate here? Because then I've got to admit that I've got no idea. But the funny thing about beliefs is that, and the language of beliefs, is that most people as adults will try out belief about this, about that and that. But if I don't know what it is that's even animating this body, if I can accept that I don't know that, how can I be so sure, as I think I'm sure, when I don't even know what's going on in my own body? So I know that's a bit of an aside, but I think it's really, really important, and that links us back to that awe thing. It means that I can just perhaps sit in the awe of, actually, I don't know, or I don't completely know. I've got some ideas, I've got even some beliefs, I've been taught some things, but I personally don't completely know, and that's extraordinary. There's an organisation called the Forgiveness Project, and I think they're all about how do you help people forgive. And there was this guy who had been a serial. There was somebody there who I think had been, I think her daughter had been murdered. There was somebody else who had been a serial burglar, and he said he was brought up into crime, he was all this stuff into crime. And there's a moment where he was speaking and he's completely changed his life around. I was transfixed that something in his life, his heart had melted. What they had all found was a room for compassion beyond their own self-righteousness, because the mother whose daughter had been taken, she's got absolutely every right to be angry and bitter for the rest of her life, but she'd found another space that allows room for movement and growth. Because I think maybe, and I don't know if I set out on this path, whatever took me on, because last thing I knew years ago, I was just on a journey. I wanted to be a singer. Ego, ego, me, 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 me. That was my intention, to be a singer. I say that, maybe I'm being a bit overly harsh about that. Maybe it wasn't, but it can be a consuming me, me, me. And that was the lens I looked at life through. For a chain of events, I ended up volunteering for the Samaritans. That awoke me to, for the first time really, to being deeply compassionate to somebody else, understanding the pain and what might lead somebody to not even feel as though they want to be here anymore. I hadn't really experienced that before, but I then suddenly became deeply compassionate to it. And probably through the work that then, suddenly I became a coach, through working with singers and wanting to help them take charge of their own lives. And bit by bit, like when you walk deeper and deeper into a forest, I feel that like before you know it, you've just gone down a particular road. And it would seem that how that road has shaped itself for me is that I am interested in this oneness aspect. I don't think that was my conscious intention. I don't know where that came from, but it seems there. And I'm interested, I'm very great, I'm humbled by it, because it gives me an opportunity to be at peace myself and to help people find peace. So that is potent to me, and it's very moving, that discovery. But the last thing I'll say about that is I think that it's actually quite simple. I actually think that the strange thing is that it's quite simple but profound. But it requires this journey where somebody's prepared to look again and afresh at themselves, the world about them. It will be painful, because I think what happens is that it requires that I've got to at least put on ice for a minute at least everything that I think about myself, including comfortable and uncomfortable things that might be holding me back. So it's scary, which is why I understand that sometimes when people have been hurt, or why individuals or communities, because if the whole, this is why when you look on a global level, when you're trying to get different religious, racial different groups or community group together, because everybody's being wronged, so we hold up our own rights. We've got to look beyond our own beliefs if we are really going to arrive at peace. It is a belief, but it would strike me that it requires somehow looking beyond and looking at who am I. And I think those questions are really exciting, because then it brings all of that, the beliefs, the values, what we're here for, who we are, what we're trying to achieve, how we got here.